Hello Virgo, and welcome to your in-depth monthly horoscope for June 2023 for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to give you some standout features to look out for, but please stay with me. I will then explore in much greater detail all the ins and outs particularly relevant to your sign, the timings and the critical influences. Now this month begins with the Sun right at the top of your situation, giving you a chance to raise your profile. But because there's such a collection of energy in House 9, your sister Earth sign of Taurus, you're almost being pushed to shake things up, to be a lot more spontaneous and daring. And even if you are somebody who does have a great appreciation of the need to provide services and be very reliable and meet your obligations, I feel that the more you can be a little more daring, the more that you're going to gain from this month. But I also feel that there could be some big thinking around your relationship sector that is going to be developing through the next 4 months right into the start of October. So I need to share that with you. But also a potentially sociable time kicks in from the 18th. So please stay with me for much more. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you're new here, it's great to have you with me. This is very much a community, so please do feel that you can share any comments. I try to interact with each one, but please also click on or tap on the subscribe button. This means every time I drop a video, you'll get an alert. Also, if you would like to get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, totally free, you can sign up for your Sun or your Ascendant or both. The choice is yours. Please see the link below. And if you would like to ascend above this zodiac broadcast and really embrace more serious astrology and the power of it and how it can influence your future so helpfully, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can provide for you your life roadmap report. This can help you to get a much more intimate understanding of the patterns that have impacted on your journey so far, but also how you can capitalize on your strength and avoid some of the challenges that may have repeated themselves. Also, my special package of 30% off, you can get your 12-month personal forecast, totally unique to you, which will give you searing insights for the months to come. If you don't know your time, my new solar package works in the same way, 30% off, the life roadmap and the forecast. But this is based on your Sun. And if you enjoy sun sign astrology videos on YouTube, this is going to be something that you easily relate to, but can still give you some incredibly valuable insights. Please see the links below for more. So Virgo, as you come into June, so the Sun is right high in the sky and is joined by your ruler on the 11th. Now Mercury initially is in the part of your situation that's very much to do with travel, tickets, anything to do with higher education, training, technology, publishing. If you're someone who's got a message you want to share, the opportunity to convey that message with conviction is certainly highlighted at the start of this month, as Mercury and the position of Jupiter alongside the North Node and also Uranus, all in that very exciting and adventurous part of your situation. So let's just focus on Jupiter and the North Node. That can be quite lucky. So if there's a part of you that has felt quite penned in and restricted, that gives you a lot of encouragement to break out. But Mercury is how you go about doing it in terms of your thinking and perhaps your communication with others. So you may be getting quite a lot of information, doing some research. Points of contact could be with institutions of learning, could be online courses. Perhaps you are actually going to be on the move, and if so, then that can be very exciting. However, Saturn, the planet of structure, of course, has moved into your sector of relating, and that is going to be slamming on the brakes on the 17th through to the 4th of November. And I think that's an interesting occurrence because of what I'm about to tell you in terms of Venus. But Saturn does actually forge a very positive link with Jupiter all through this month within 3 degrees, which is very influential. They become exactly sextile on the 19th. So if there's something where you're collaborating with someone, but it's something that you both can input your skills and talents and complement one another, but it creates mutual growth, that would be really good. So for example, if you've got a hobby that you can work with another person on collectively, or it's something you can do in a business partnership, that could be a very exciting influence. But on the 4th, we do have the full moon. So as much as the sun and then from the 11th, Mercury are asking you to reach for the stars in terms of raising your profile, the moon in the sign of Sagittarius is just asking you to be mindful that whatever ambitions you have, they need to be serviced by a support structure. So stay conscious on who's providing that, or whether you're providing it to yourself enough. So too much work and not enough rest and recuperation may be something you need to consider in the following 2 weeks. If something is a bit out of alignment in terms of that classic work-life balance, this is a good time to think about it. But then on the 5th, the big dramatic event that I've hinted about in the introduction. Because Venus, the planet of relating, spends the first 10 days of this month in 2 different zodiac signs in opposition to Pluto. Pluto is the planet of power, but also can be of secrets, and it can be those deeper machinations that aren't always apparent. And Pluto, since 2008, has been in the part of your situation to do with romance, and it's actually going to be returning to that sector on the 11th, inversing in its retrograde back into Capricorn, your sister Earth sign. But I think what this is going to do through to the 21st of January next year is give you a lot of food for thought about your romantic needs or your creative output. You know, are you reaching out in the way that's really very satisfying and gratifying to you? Because Pluto is asking us to understand those deeper patterns in our existence or deeper needs. Now, Venus moving in opposition to Pluto can create politics. And because Venus initially this month is actually in a very sociable part of your situation, it's possible that this may not be completely obvious. Maybe, however, you're going to encounter someone in a completely sort of friendly way who has quite an impact on you. Maybe it's their viewpoints, maybe it's their philosophies, maybe it's just that's great fun to be with. But something can charge you up at the start of this month that gives you food for thought, and then Venus moves into your 12th house. Now Venus normally would work through the 12th house over around about 28 days, but because it's going through such a long retrograde this year for 44 days, which begins on the 23rd of July, the 12th house can be where we separate from something that's not working. The 12th house can be a mourning, and I mean MOURNING, sector for relationships. So I feel that at the very least, if you're in a tie which doesn't meet all of your needs, you're going to go through a very deep period of reflection, particularly with Saturn going retrograde on the 17th in your sector of relating, despite that good link to Jupiter all this month. And why this is particularly important is that Mars, since the 20th of last month, has been cutting its way through your 12th house too, and it's probably been evoking some unexpected extremes in your emotions. Some points feeling tearful and quite emotional, and others feeling really quite unexpectedly angry. And I think Venus joining up with Mars, and they do get very close together towards the end of this month is a very evocative combination. Now, if you're single, it could mean that you start to think about someone from your past, and I'm not saying that you're going to get back together with them, but you could feel very nostalgic and start checking them out on social media, or looking at old photographs, or reading old letters or old mementos of the places that you visited. So you could feel a lot more sentimental about someone who's not around, or it could be that that sentimentality is directed towards someone who's no longer with us. So you could, the mourning that I spoke of could be for someone who has passed over, and in a very profound way some more grieving can take place. But also it can mean, if you're single, that someone starts to show an interest in you, but not in a particularly overt way. So it could be, for example, a surprise connection with someone, but it could be someone who's at the moment not fully available, and you could be attracted to a clandestine relationship if that's something that you feel that you could do. Or it could be that someone hints that they're drawn towards you, or you could find yourself really even fantasizing about what it might be like to do something outside of an existing involvement, but if it's not meeting all your needs. This is the key. Then on the 11th, as Mercury, your ruler, climbs high in the sky, that's asking you to think about potentially retraining around work, applying for jobs in a different way, doing applications or presentations. It's going to be a busy time joining up with the Sun in your sector of success. And of course, because it's moved into the sign of Gemini, which, like your sign, is governed by Mercury, this can be a time when you do well around work. But because of Venus and Mars being in the 12th house, maybe someone from your past can be influential, or put in a good word for you, or in some way steer things in a way which is helpful. Nepotism is still alive and kicking, I'm absolutely sure. So it may be a case of who as much as what you know. But let's go back to Venus. So it's a very long transit, and whatever your romantic status, and remember Venus also governs money, but also our self-worth, there's going to be a lot of reflection. That's guaranteed. And it could be that you're going to emerge from it very much intact, and you feel that actually everything is fine, you just wanted to check things out. But if there are any major chinks in the armour of an existing relationship, I think they could be really exposed from now through to the early autumn in the northern hemisphere, and early spring in the south. Now, I mentioned about Pluto also inverting back into Capricorn. That happens on the 11th, but in week 3 it forges a quincunx with the Sun, but also the Sun squares up to Neptune, and that brings us to the new moon, which occurs on the 18th. The Sun squaring Neptune is really complex. Neptune's in your sector of relating. The Sun and the new moon and then Mercury are in the most visible part of your situation, where you connect with the wider world. So a professional relationship could get a bit tricky. New moons are usually a time to set our intentions and be very positive and really hope for some kind of to instigate something that then brings a reward. But this one needs to be approached with great care, because Neptune can distort, drain, diminish, and cause some complex energies to be applied. So because it's in your sector of relating, and Saturn goes into the retrograde the day before, and we have Venus and Mars in your 12th house, it could even be around work relationships, where you start to rethink whether your previous application, conscientious dedication, sacrifice is necessarily being received and appreciated quite as much as it could. So I feel that there's some uncertainty can be around professional relationships as much as personal ones. But then on the 21st, the Sun, through the summer solstice, arrives in your 11th house of friendship, future hopes, longer term aspirations. But because of the quincunx with Pluto that it's been running for a week, that is part of what this cardinal quadrant number 2 that comes in for the following 13 weeks represents to you. So even though Pluto is now back in Capricorn, I think we have to see it for the purpose of simplicity as still being in house 6, and the position of the Sun and the solstice in house 11, the collective. So are you still tempted to give too much to situations that don't really have the potential or are not really working successfully enough to actually be future-proofed, which is what the 11th house is about? So in other words, are you giving more to a situation than someone else is giving back to you? Does it have a future is the question. The 28th sees Mercury move into this friendly location as well, which is brilliant, and the Sun actually forges a fantastic link with Jupiter as the month draws to a close, which is potentially very jolly, because the Sun in the 11th house of kinship and sociability, Jupiter in the 9th house of travel and being a bit more gregarious and free-spirited and not worrying about things too much. If you are single, you could head off somewhere, but then with Venus contacting Mars in the last 3 days, you could have a really hot encounter with someone, but you may not necessarily want to publicize it. You may want to keep it very close to your chest. Also, the Sun in your 11th house does forge a much more constructive link to Saturn as the month draws to a close. Again, that can be very helpful. So there can be some restoration of your faith in certain people, situations as the month closes, but Mars in your 12th house does forge an almighty and rather agitated and abrasive right angle with Uranus in the last 10 days, and that's very impatient and something, because Uranus is the planet of truth in the 9th house, which can be about truths, could break into the open, and it could come in quite an erupting way, because Mars in the 12th house works like that. It can, even for placid people, can suddenly find themselves being very ratty indeed. So something just may have to just surface, even if quite explosively, to be honest, because it needs to be ventilated. So I think some real truths might start to work into your situation around all sorts of relationships this month. I don't want this to seem fearful. Nothing's going to call out to you that's not active within your situation. So if you have a completely devoted and happy relationship, I think the chances are you will be thinking about past family members that are no longer with you, and perhaps really enjoy and have some quiet time together. If you have children, perhaps parking them with a trusted relative or friend and going and having some real time in nature or by the seaside and having a bit of escapism. Why not? So only the relationships that aren't working are going to be exposed during this month, Virgo. That's the fact, and there is huge potential for you to raise your profile and be very successful in terms of your work, as long as you're open and embracing the need for change, which is being pushed in your direction primarily by Uranus, but by those other influences as well. They're really saying to you, change is as good as a rest. And if you're just being very virtuous, going through processes, because that's what you've always done, this is a month where you may be asked to rethink in quite a radical way. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do like, comment, or subscribe.